coming up a couple of meetings, obviously. So why don't we get started? Before we get started, if we could all maybe stand to hit the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out this afternoon. We've been doing a series of these town halls, listening sessions to try to cover the district, to have this conversation about a very important issue, and that's the issue of Syria. And first, I'd like to thank Dunkirk, the city, for opening up the city hall so that we could have this conversation. And really, I'm looking for as much input as possible. And we've had 2 days of this traveling started over in Owego and Big Flats and Geneva, and we're down in Cornell, Olean, and out here in Dunkirk this afternoon to really have this dialogue and this conversation about the issue of Syria and our military engagement there. Before we open it up, maybe I thought, and this is what we've done at each one of these events so far, is kind of give you some of my thoughts, my thought processes, my decision making, and where I stand as of today. First and foremost, this is one of those decisions that is very, very difficult, and it's one of the hardest decisions that we face because we're talking about our men and women in the military. We're talking about our sons and our daughters, and potentially putting them in harm's way. And I take that responsibility very seriously. And when we are dealing with a situation like what we saw in Syria, with chemical weapons being utilized. Obviously, when you see pictures of women and children being killed with chemical weapons, that is an emotional, it's a horrific, barbaric, despicable act that obviously hits you personally and hits you emotionally. And what I have tried to do is deal with that emotion, but also look at the big picture and look at the obligation that I have to the office, to the people of the 23rd Congressional District, to the state, and to the nation, and make a decision in regards to this matter that is in our national security, our American interests, and what is best for America going forward, what is best for Washington, for us here in the 23rd Congressional District. And I will tell you that what I have come to the conclusion, and I'm looking for your input on it. Not a final decision, and the final decision is when I walk to the floor, put the card in the box, and I go yes or no. But what I have come to the conclusion is that the proposed action to go into Syria with a limited airstrike is the wrong path for America going forward. And we will be voting against the resolution that is being asked upon us to vote for. So with that, there is a lot of issues with that path. There's a lot of issues with the path of if we go in and have a military strike. The risk of escalation, to me, as a result of that type of military strike is legitimate, it's real, and it's going to have consequences. And that is one of the reasons I've come to a no position on this, because I don't see a real long-term plan. I don't see a real long-term strategy to deal with that risk of escalation and the destabilization in the region that will come from it, and that runs the risk of a potential additional chemical attack. Now, I will tell you, there are counter arguments to that position, and I recognize them, because if we don't act after chemical weapons have been utilized, there are serious credibility questions and issues that America now faces across the world, and that could have a destabilizing effect in and of itself in the region and in the area. And you have to weigh those two together. So, it's a difficult choice, it's a difficult position, and absent something compelling, however, I believe it's the right decision to not engage in Syria as proposed. But I came here to listen to you. And so with that, I'd like to open it up to input, to your concerns, maybe offer you some additional information. What we handed out is a copy of the actual resolution that the White House has sent over, and also some background information, but very limited background information, kind of a primer on the issue. But hopefully we can answer some of the questions you may have as we go forward. Sure. And Joe? Yeah.
Okay, Congressman Green, my question is, if, and of course, in the beginning, I was thinking very much what you just said. However, given what's been going on with the current hearings that the Senate and the Congress that I've been watching for the last 2 days, if we do not make some kind of very precise, very targeted act, what will happen? You've got Iran, who is right there. You have Russia now, who is there. We're dealing with North Korea. So the message that will be sent if we do nothing is not just that we are a weakened country or our president has lost face in some way, but it will be that will give the other countries who are dangerous an opportunity then to continue with their chemical weapons or nuclear weapons. So while it's a real conflicted situation sometimes, we must do something. We've got to get a side out. We have to respond. We've said there was a red line. Is there or isn't there?
So what I'm hearing from you is you're advocating for a full regime change, going in, taking out the chemical weapons plus the government. And I will tell you that discussion is happening in Washington and across other spectrums of the area. From my perspective, that is very dangerous. And also coming off of a situation where we've had multiple military engagements, and I'm not a supporter of nation building. I don't believe that's appropriate. That policy has long-term risk also. And I understand the concern of doing nothing. I truly do. And what message does this send to folks who may feel emboldened now that you can use chemical weapons and nothing is going to happen to you? I would offer this. If the situation escalates, and if we're talking about a situation where America is attacked, or American interests, or American allies are attacked, that's a whole different situation. Also, if this is such an international offense, where is the international coalition developing to stand with us to say, we reject this? That's not happening. When I see what's happening across the world and folks not joining hands to stand up to this transgression that the Assad regime did, that sends a message to me also, is that if this is an international crossing of some type of standard or norm or legal status, then we should do it as a coalition of international bodies. And until that occurs, that's part of my decision-making process to say, no.
Shouldn't someone take the first step? I mean, someone has to step up.
The concern I have is that if we do it unilaterally, from American point of view, because also bear in mind what's going on right now. What's going on right now is potentially, if I'm Assad, and I know America is thinking about attacking, and I'm Assad, who's already, in my opinion, clearly responsible for the decision-making of unleashing chemicals, killing women and children of his own country. I would be taking those same women and children that are left and putting them into military targets that are going to get hit when those missiles come in. That type of publicity, that type of image that would then be shared around the world would be something that is very problematic, and it would also potentially unite these two factions that are primarily Sunni and Shiite Muslim factions fighting a civil war, and potentially say, you know what, we're no longer to fight each other. We need to fight the common enemy, which is Israel and America. And then you have an escalation on religious grounds to a level of a conflict that's out of control. And so I just, until we have more of those international type of coalitions developing, I think that the proposed action you referred to is something that is not worth the risk.
So if the other nations got behind it, you would be comfortable going to it?
It's a different situation. It's a different set of fact patterns, but I wouldn't say necessarily just. It depends on who. Two of the key people that are critical in this decision or in this scenario is Russia and China. I think maybe what we should be focusing on right now is using diplomatic and sanctions, economic sanctions, and trying to get Russian and Chinese influence over the situation to contain the situation in Syria, and then utilize that to potentially leverage that pressure to get chemical weapons as a concession to a resolution of this out of the hands of Assad, out of the hands of Syria, and have them destroyed. That is something we've been working on behind the scenes for the last few days with other members to potentially say that could be a path forward that could be utilized as opposed to military transgression or aggression.
Congressman, thank you for coming. My name is Phil Julian. I'm a resident of Dunkirk. Assad has said that there were no gases used. Who knows whether we can believe him or not. But Putin in Russia has also said he hasn't seen enough evidence for Russia to take a position on it. Now, this whole thing reminds me of an incident back in 2003. I happened to be watching TV when then Secretary of State Colin Powell went before the United Nations General Assembly. And he held up charts and graphs showing the locations of all the weapons of mass destruction that were in Iraq. Of course, the United Nations inspectors came back from Iraq and said there were none. Somehow we thought we knew better. Now, either we were being lied to or our intelligence was terrible. But we ended up in a 10-year war, costing us 5,000 lives and $12 to $15 billion a month. So my question would be, how do we know that we're being told the truth now, if we might not have been getting the truth then? And we realize that for every action, there's a reaction. In other words, when we start dropping bombs, they might look good and effective for a few days. Sooner or later, there's going to be a reaction in the form of terrorism. We saw it in New York City in 9/11. We saw it in Boston, I believe it was in April of this year. So I'm not sure that bombing is the answer. Negotiations and diplomacy would be a much better answer. And without the support of the world, and I fully understand and support your position in that there is no lack of a coalition, I think it'd be extremely unwise for us to take that kind of an action right now in the absence of any concrete information that would convince China and Russia and other friends of ours to join the force. How do you feel about all that? First of all, do you think we're getting an honest appraisal of this? Do you think our intelligence is flawable?
Yeah. The question of intelligence has come up quite a bit. I believe the intelligence information and evidence that we've seen has been pretty solid. There is no doubt in my mind that chemical weapons were utilized. There is no doubt in my mind that Assad or people that he is directly responsible for at high levels made the decision to utilize those chemical weapons, and he needs to be held accountable for it, because there is a gray area there in regards to, was it Assad personally who made the call, or was it a top-level general or someone of his nature? There's a breakdown of chain of command, but that individual is so high in the government that it's essentially Assad and Assad's accountable for those actions. There's also intelligence that is out there that says maybe the rebels do not have clean hands in this exchange, and that's a legitimate question that's still out there. So you raise a very valid point, but from my perspective, the information that we've seen is that chemical weapons were used. Assad responsibility lays there, in my opinion. Is it 100%? Could I guarantee you 100%? I can guarantee 100% anything. But other than what I told you, that's where I see it.
The American intelligence, real intelligence, UN intelligence, where's the intelligence coming from?
Combination of all. And also UN physical specimens.
Israel has a very effective lobby in Washington. Are they in any way influencing our position or decision on this? I know you've accepted the trip to Israel earlier this year.
When you APAC, I believe is who you're referring to, that lobby group. They have come out in full support of the president's request. We are absolutely standing in opposition to that. So as to how those tie together, that's a question I don't know where I'm trying to read between the lines as to where your questioning is going.
I'm trying to get
But
the base of the support that they have in Washington. If you accept it, I'll then take it from the Israel.
this year,
When was it this year?
we went to Israel on a cultural educational exchange mission. Fully disclosed, everything was out there. But obviously, if they're trying to influence me, they're not doing a good job because they're
I
not doing what
understand.
they want us to do.
I understand that, but you're not the only one in Congress.
But I appreciate that, and I'll tell you, going to the Middle East was very eye-opening to me to deal with these issues. because being there is something that is different than reading reports on the matter. I don't know if anyone here has been to the Middle East. I don't know if anyone has been to that area. That gentleman over there, he probably was there on a military mission and speak best to it. Being there on the ground gives you a whole different perspective as to what we're dealing with and how we're dealing with it. And so we learned a tremendous amount on that trip, and we're continuing to learn as we go.
Just before we call this question, I just wanted the mayor to put his head in. I just want to say thank you to the mayor. We put these things together on very short notice over Labor Day weekend, and the mayor and staff were very accommodating, letting us use the room. So I just wanted to say publicly thank you very much.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Glad to have you guys anytime.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it.
Our pleasure. Way better than this year.
Doing well up there.
So they were able to do this over a holiday weekend, so thank you very
Our
much.
pleasure.
Yes, sir, you had it.
Larry Zollinger, South Dayton. Item number 1, I am glad that the Congress is asserting its constitutional requirement that before our troops go to war, that the Congress must act, that this will not be a unilateral decision by the President. Second, from what you said earlier, it sounds like there are no good decisions, or no good choices. You're only going to make the least bad choice. And third, there was a story in the Buffalo News the other day to the effect that 22 veterans per day in the United States are committing suicide. Some of those people are committing suicide because the Veterans Administration is either unable or unwilling to get them the care and the help they need to overcome their post-traumatic stress disorders. And that's an obscenity. And it goes back to President Lincoln in his second inaugural when he said, we must care for the veteran and he who was born to battle and care for his widow and his orphan. And the fact that we're not doing that with the veterans of the last war, I say we should clean up the problems of our last wars before we go off on another one. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Because when it comes to our veterans, just so we're clear, please, if you know a veteran who needs any services or assistance, we have a dedicated staffer. All he does is veteran work. Being the son of an Army veteran, 20-year Army veteran, World War II in Korea, Silver Star recipient, multiple Purple Hearts, we stand with our vets, not only when they're asked to go, but when they come home until the end. So, no, our office stands ready and open to deal with that. Thank you. I applaud you.
Ma'am.
Hi, Kathy Kessler from Oral Bay, Chicago County team leader. I'd like to know if there is a possibility of possibly limiting what they're going to do over in Syria, possibly making it a fly zone or someplace where people will be safe.
The possibilities, if you're to amend the resolution, it is going on as we speak. I was just receiving some information as we were driving over here. With the Senate is narrowing down on some of the language in the resolution. So the resolution that the White House sent over is subject to change. It is subject to further debate and amendment. But when we talk about military engagement, I think we run the same risk. It depends on what you're talking, where that could go. We'll have to see how the debate unfolds. But when you're talking about military engagement in Syria, I think you run the same risk of what we're talking about with the limited airstrikes that the President's asking.
And also, is it true that other countries have said they're backing Al-Qaeda? So if we get involved, they will double their funding to Al-Qaeda against us.
There are,
Regarding that.
I can't comment on that. I don't know exactly what you may be referring to. But I do know that the two factions, you have the Assad regime and you have the Free Syrian Army as the rebels. As the rebels do have Al-Qaeda influence. And that's one of the conflicting issues that we have to deal with here, as to who are we, if we destabilize the Assad regime, take them down, or through the result of this, who do we get left with? Who's going to run that country? And one of the real scenarios is that the rebels would take over, and those rebels have Al-Qaeda influence within their ranks, And if you let Al-Qaeda be in control of a country like Syria, do you not then create another risk? And those are those scenarios B, C, D. If we do A, what is the next scenario and how we're going to handle it? And it clearly hasn't been dealt with to the extent that we need to make this decision today.
Are you going to look into that?
I am focusing right now on this behind-the-scenes effort of trying to use diplomatic and economic sanctions, use our connections with Russia and China in particular, to put pressure on the Syrian regime of getting these chemical weapons destroyed out of the control of Syrian influence, because I think that would be a better scenario, because then the real threat of these chemical weapons, which is a threat to America, and I recognize that, if they fall in the wrong hands, that I'm interested in trying to neutralize. And I think that's the path that has the best likelihood of success.
Sir, in the back, you need your hand up.
Congressman, Chief Warrant Officer Mitchell, U.S. Army retired. And I just want to bring up some of the unintended consequences. I'm an OIF that has spiraled out of control between 2006 and 2008. The consensus was on the ground, boots on the ground, that we had made a mistake and they would have actually been better off with Saddam back in charge. And secondly, where's the position of the Arab League on this? Because at Pearl in Bahrain, when they had a problem, Saudi Arabia, they had no problem rolling in there and dealing with their own problems. What's your opinion on that thing?
The Arab League's position on it is one of those things that is significant. We are dealing with the Middle East, the Arab world, and we're the Arab League, and it's not 100% clear to me. Obviously, I think it's in their interest to have a stable area, stable region, and I've gotten some indications that the Arab League has they would like to see it stabilized, but they're not willing.
Stabilize Bahrain without our help.
And that's exactly the point, but that's as far as they're willing to go. And until they're willing to go further than that, I think the positioning from them is maybe more rhetoric.
So they want to do it on our nickel, not theirs. Okay, thank you.
And not get involved into the internal mess that they would get into when the Arab League takes on a fellow Arab influence. So that does speak volumes. You're touching on something that's critical to this decision making.
Mr. Reed, Jay Warren, Dunkirk, Lieutenant Dunkirk. I want to reiterate Mr. Julian saying thank you for coming out, spending 2 days on the road, engaging with your constituents. I think that's a very positive thing, an attribute that you have. I did have a chance to talk with Congressman Reed on 2 occasions, and if any of you haven't had a chance, he's a very genuine man. The world is flat. There's a book written a few years back about how the shape of the world has changed. And are we changing as a nation to accept that? Are we going to be the same nation we were? Are we going to be the superpower that we have been? We certainly aren't the economic power that we were. We're struggling in a fragile economy. Young children can't get jobs. Unemployment lines, welfare lines. I totally agree with what you're saying, although it's difficult as it is to stand back and watch these atrocities. But I think the idea of sanctions, coalition building, ally building, negotiations, I think that's where you're on the right track. I don't know are you getting phone calls, are you getting mail? What are you hearing? Have you been to 3 other town meetings? Are you hearing the same things? Or
This is our 6th meeting over those 2 days, and I'll tell you, phone calls, email, Facebook, phone calls to the office, to my house, we've received a tremendous amount, and overwhelmingly, people are opposed to this engagement, and I can see why.
Legislator Horton. Thanks, Congressman, for coming. Vince Morgan. You know, I spent a long time in the Air Force and pretty much a student of air power. And one of the difficulties of technology is when you see a tomahawk or you see a laser-guided bomb, it looks so surgical. It fits the idea that we could punish somebody. But truly, our success will be the American public opinion. Center of gravity of America is public opinion. And it just seems to me, the way this process is going, it's not there. The public opinion is not there. Our greatest ally, England, is not with us. So I think you are on the right track, because to think that we will do a punishment, a surgical strike, that will be the end of it, I think the odds of that are very, very slim. And then when we escalate, now the public opinion erodes even more. And the people that are against us in the world, they know it's all about public opinion. So I don't think the president would have gone to the Congress if he didn't feel a need to build public support. You listen to the debates, and I think you hear on both sides. Secretary Kerry is very passionate, and it's like trying to build it, but it just isn't there. And that always scares me when we try to go to war without America behind us, because we've done that several times. And like this gentleman said about the veterans, you know, we wind up continuing on. So
I appreciate that. Appreciate that input. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
We're 1 minute.
My name is Shirley Lehman. I live in Kennedy, south of Jamestown, and I'm here representing the Southern Tier 2 Party Patriots. And we just had a board meeting last night. We overwhelmingly voted to oppose any military intervention in Syria now, as for reasons that we've heard here already, and specifically because there are two sides fighting a civil war. Neither side will be back. Their atrocities on both sides just horrible. Civil wars are the worst. Why should we get involved in this civil war at this point in time, unless it escalates, which very well happen, and God forbid that we are involved, and it could escalate even to a World War III scenario. Really, I think I could see this. We could see this happening fast with the hotbed region of the Middle East. And so, I mean, with all the opinions we've had here, we totally agree. Stay out right now. I mean, humanitarian aid, sure. Let the people see that Americans do care. We feel terrible. It's just horrific what's happening over there. But to intervene militarily with what we've heard so far, we think wrong.
Well, I appreciate that. And you touch on something that's come up and that we're concerned about, and the humanitarian aid, the refugee situation. You got 500,000 folks going into Turkey, 500,000 folks going into Jordan. I think there's an opportunity that could potentially be addressed too, in the sense of showing America is not just turning its back on people, but we're willing to stand with those refugees and see what we can do. So we're working with some partners on that front too, potentially to provide assistance to assist them. And I think that's important, because that's a destabilizing area also with the refugees. Yeah.
Yes, I know the UN inspectors were there and their report hasn't come out yet. But what is the UN doing as an organization? I know everyone just says that Russia will veto anything. But shouldn't they still speak up about it? And are we pushing them at all to do that?
Yeah, the UN has urged caution, is my understanding. The reports we read from the UN cautioning the U.S. Not to go in to Syria. They are compiling additional evidence, coming up with a final report. I think that's about 2 weeks out as to what they actually were going to be able to identify potentially who did what, when, who did what, and those types of things. Now, the preliminary information from the UN is that there is no doubt chemical weapons were utilized. And that's been coming out. You may have read some stuff in the public domain about that. So there's some initial reports that they've given, but my understanding of the UN right now is caution, and obviously the big roadblock in the UN is the Russian veto in the Security Council. And that's why Russia is critical to resolving this going forward. And we need to put pressure on Russia and Putin in particular to get him to change his position and the Russian position on it. And now the president is over there meeting with Putin, and hopefully through those conversations there may be a changing moment there. But I don't hold a lot of hope for that. but we'll see how it unfolds.
But is there more that the UN could do?
I believe the UN could take, the UN could take a much more aggressive role in regards to getting this information, getting it out, getting those reports compiled, and also use their ability to reach out to other coalition builders of saying, this is what we're dealing with. Hey, Russia, no doubt, this is what happened, this is where you're going, and now, because when I read the Russian reports, I believe there's some indications that they even questioned whether or not chemical weapons were utilized, that it was all a rumor, fabrication. That evidence needs to be put in front of them squarely and have them have to refute it.
Tracy Canfield, Silver Creek. I saw in the news today that Senator McCain came out also in opposition to the president's resolution. And you mentioned that amendments are being made as we speak. Do you know what those amendments are, and when they're made, will you support them?
Yeah. No, the amendments that we're aware of is kind of amendments trying to narrow the scope of that resolution, because if you read the resolution, it's pretty broad. What talks about imminent, necessary, what is proper, and those types of things. So that's generally where we've been seeing the amendments, is to try to narrow the scope of the authority and limit the duration by time frames, 90 days, 60 days. There are some folks who are trying to go the other way and broaden it, and I think Senator McCain is one of those individuals who wants to see more of the let's go in, remove all chemical weapons, a very aggressive campaign, and some people were potentially talking about boots on the grounds and those types of amendments. So it's a very fluid, dynamic situation, but I still go back to the initial calculation that I'm really concerned that if we go in on a military basis, you then start the domino effects that have not been fully vetted and fully studied and a strategy deployed so that we know exactly where we're going to go. And that because of those unanswered questions, that causes me a lot of hesitancy to get behind, let's go into another country, let's bomb another country, and let's go down this path of military engagement.
Good afternoon. My name is Susan Clark, and my
With
son...
Lucas.
With
Lucas is here.
Lucas.
I'm sure this is what you planned on doing after
After
your first
school,
day. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you. And we appreciate you being here and other people coming to voice their opinions as well. We support your stance on this resolution. I'd just like to say that I was telling one of the reporters that diplomacy is a great strength, much more so than any type of military action. That's where we would show power, true power. Let's say this resolution is struck down. What happens next? Where do we go from there? Where's our role in this if this is struck down?
It's a great question. And the first answer to that question would be, what does the president do? Because the president then has to make his own decision. Does he follow that congressional directive? Because he clearly has said that he has the authority, that this going to Congress is just a kind of second thought, not really required, but he's going to do it because he feels it's appropriate. So then that question has to be answered. And that will dictate a lot of what happens next. Because if he disregards Congress and acts, that's going to have a whole slew of consequences. If he abides by what Congress does, if it's voted down, then you got a situation where what do the folks on the ground do? Does this embolden Assad? Does this embolden Iran to engage in further escalation of activity using chemical weapons and others, even conventional weapons, unleashing of conventional weapons? And then does he contain it to Syria? Does he go out to kind of poke the bear a little further? So it can change rapidly. But I think that would be a different field to be on than what we would be on now. Because what he would likely do is something to escalate it himself, which then changes the whole conversation. Okay? It's not as if it's going to go away.
We get him to withdraw that. I think the resolution should be withdrawn. I think there should be pressure now. Don't even go and vote. is to withdraw the resolution. There's enough public opinion out there, I think, you're guarding it. It's not just happening in this room. This is a microcosm of the rest of the country, I believe. I don't know about the South or the West. To withdraw the resolution, putting it to a vote at this time is, you're set it. This is a critical point in the future of the United States of America. For many reasons.
I appreciate that. But it's the vote we're going to deal with, and that's what we got elected to do. All right, let's go here. New voice.
Question. First, I wanted to let you know I came from a peace vigil today at the Syria campus where we united and said that we do not want to see military action. However, I do agree with Nikki of what she said. I mean, you look at those pictures of those children, and I don't care if they're Americans or not, they're children, and it's millions of them, and they were slaughtered in these chemical weapons in the refugee camps. I think for us to do nothing is wrong too. I wonder how many have read The Economist, is it Robert, right? And he came up with some very good, freezing your assets, doing sanctions. Why don't we look at the non-violent, but very powerful? And we know non-violence is powerful. Mahatma Gandhi taught us that. Martin Luther King Jr. taught us that. Non-violent methods are just as powerful as the military ones. Yeah, I would like to see the Congress in these amendments. I'd like to see you maybe take the lead on it and really come up with some very strong, powerful, but non-violent military things to tell them this is unacceptable. Unacceptable. The United States will not accept it. The world will not accept it. However, we are also bigger and more powerful. We don't have to use weapons. We can use non-violent means.
You touch on something. And that's the path of diplomacy and sanctions is what I was referring to earlier, and I see that path as something we're going to be strongly involved with. And when it comes to the sanctions, that is something that could be utilized and also could be utilized on some folks, potentially, say Russia and others who have a financial interest with America. We're on some trade issues. We're just involved with America in some trading relations, but it's something to explore, and I appreciate it. New voices.
We'll go one
Go here. They'll go here.
No, it doesn't matter.
All right.
Congressman, Jim Elias here. I think the forming a coalition and, of course, the non-attack, that's rather obvious here. Throw a little, not humor, but what happened to the speak softly and carry a big stick? No matter how softly you speak, you do have to sort of carry a stick. I don't know if this has any ramifications of what we're talking about now, but it's international affairs. And because of some experiences and contacts in the Balkans, seeing smaller nations up and coming and what our country represents in these nations and working with embassies over there, this Belarus and our opinion of the United States of not settling this, of why an ambassador was murdered, still haunts me. And I think this might have some repercussions and also effects on subtly of what's starting to go on now. So until we take care of our own business, as you had sort of indicated that we take care of our house, I strongly encourage you and Congress that we've got to really find out why an ambassador, because this is very symbolic in these, call them third world countries, I don't want to say third world, but underdeveloped countries, very, very important out there. I think the Colonel can attest to this. He's been in the Far East, and you know what it's like and what we're thought of there. Please, let's go after this.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay?
John Ames, you said earlier in response to maybe the first question is Assad needs to be held accountable. And you referred to sanctions, but it seems like you're talking about sanctions for countries that would have an influence over this decision, like China and Russia.
Potentially on Syria, but Syria primarily.
Oh, and then you indicated diplomacy as a second thing. Are there other things that you have in mind, as you said earlier, that Assad needs to be held accountable, ways that might be accomplished?
Obviously, the sanctions is what I was referring to, and on Syria, and diplomacy, and also to make sure that the atrocity that he perpetrated is brought out to the world, across the world, publicized across the world, so that people know who did this and that he needs to be held accountable from the world stage. Not that he'll have people saying, well, it's made up, or his ability to deny, really make a mockery of his denial is what I would look to do and continue to push on that front. The other issue is obviously, when we talk about Assad, there needs to be, he attacks Israel, if he attacks America, American interests, American embassies, that's a whole different situation that would carry different weight, would be obviously, and I think would be a game changer in regards to where we're going militarily.
Judy Phillips, Forestville, New York. I'm trying, I guess I'm feeling like I'm the only one sitting on the fence in this room. I want to try and understand, you spoke about Putin, how important it is President Obama being over there and convincing him that Assad, one of his generals, is responsible for the chemical weapons used. Russia has economic interests. I don't follow about China. Maybe you could explain that. Yet I don't hold out a lot of hope that anything's going to convince Putin. I think he almost has the upper hand here. So maybe you can explain a little bit how you're seeing that relationship and why you have belief that I am very worried that whether Congress votes down that we're going to go ahead.
Yeah, it's a legitimate concern. The Russian influence, obviously Russia and Syria have a vibrant, robust trading relationship. Russia also has a military base on the Mediterranean, which is their only Mediterranean access in Syria, which is critical to Russia. That's why I believe there's interests that are pushing Russia to defend and try to protect Syria and the South in this relationship. China has had not as a direct role. They've been kind of, obviously there's a lot of interest in keeping stability in the area, not having to go up into a regional conflict in other areas for economic purposes, but they're more of an indirect relationship to this than Russia, in my opinion. But they have given signs of a willingness not to engage and stand up in opposition to Syria. Is why, and because of their role in the Security Council and elsewhere, that's why their lack of being clear in opposition to Syria is something that is of concern.
Are they part of this chemical weapons convention, or is China one of the parties?
My understanding is that I believe they are. I'll double check that for you, just to make sure. But the general norm in the international understanding and relations is that chemical weapons are not acceptable.
What about the countries that surround Syria? My niece just spent a year in Jordan, and Amman, less than 60 miles from the border of Syria. And what about Turkey, Israel, Lebanon, Jordan? Are they part of this chemical weapons convention?
These countries are in an area that is very, should we say, destabilized very quickly overnight. They are each facing their own internal strife with Turkey, Jordan, and others. A lot of it's from the Arab Spring and filtering over. Others is just internal processes that they're dealing with. Jordan is facing some economic conditions that are difficult, given the refugees and other situations that they're fighting. So that's adding to the instability of the area that if you add this to it, could further destabilize it. As to signing on the treaties, why don't we do this? Why don't we get you the full
Got it
list?
right here, actually. Yeah. The People's Republic of China is a signatory to the Chemical Weapons Convention.
They are.
Yeah. And it appears to be the only folks that are not Syria, Egypt, South Sudan, Angola, North Korea.
But Saudi Arabia is?
Yeah. Power of the mic there.
No, it's good. And we want to give correct information out there, and the vast majority of the countries in the world have signed on to the treaty, and we just want to make sure that we're all right. Well,
Actually, one last question. Yeah.
Thank you for coming, Commissioner. Whereas I feel that a military strike right now would be useless. I don't oppose it if you vote against it. I'm concerned that we may tie our hands and make ourselves weaker and cause things to be more unstable there by not acting in some way. I think the President should have the authority to use many means to create stability or punishment, if that's the word you want to use, whether it be a military strike, whether it be economic sanctions, naval quarantine, air quarantines, cut off banking, whatever those different options. I'm afraid that if we just say no, giving the President some authority to do something, that may be more unstabilizing, make the United States look weaker, and like we don't care. I think everybody in this room is abhorred by the thought of somebody being killed or maimed by chemical weapons. Brings up thoughts of Holocaust to me, by the way. So I'm afraid that taking a position of, no, we're not going to do nothing, is a worse situation than, okay, let's pass a resolution that gives the President some authority to do something limited. Whether I'm more in favor of quarantines and embargoes than necessarily military strike. But he shouldn't be limited from making a military strike. If he feels as Commander in Chief, that's in the best interest of the United States.
well, I appreciate that, and that's definitely sanctions and the other paths. That's why we're interested in finding that path going forward, because just stopping right now is not going to be something that we can consider. As to the President, he came to Congress in this situation. Libya, he didn't. So he must have some internal conflict as to when he needs congressional approval, when he doesn't need congressional approval. That inconsistency to me has caused some internal debate in my own mind as to why now and not why not then. That's a whole different conversation that we're not going to weigh into, because I want to focus and deal with the issue at hand, and that's the vote that's coming up. Sure.
Are there any other countries that are willing to go in with us? I know France has been.
France has given some indications that they're willing to go in. Great Britain obviously voted against going in, but there are indications that there may be just rhetoric. France hasn't really been as clear as we probably need. I mean, we need a coalition of, no kidding, we are standing with you if we ever consider going down this path.
Is Germany waiting? No, Germany's within.
Yeah,
Why do we take our troops out of those countries? Why do we have troops in those countries? Why are we protecting them when they won't back us up?
well, I will be straight with you and tell you that the politics of oil is real. Oil is definitely some of the decision-making matrix in this that comes up. That's why I've been talking since day one about an energy policy that hopefully leads to energy independence and security, because that would have. But they control the area. It's in the region. You asked why the military is there. Syria doesn't have much oil. whatsoever. But the region is why you have the military engagement
No,
there.
I mean, why do we
Was the
have
question.
military in Germany and England? Why
Oh,
a lot of
Europe.
there? I mean,
Okay.
why after, 60 years after World War II, why are we still sending troops
They
there?
make good beer.
Yeah, it's a fair debate, it's a fair question. I will say that having platforms around the world upon which we can strike from to annihilate these threats is something I've been supportive of. Not supportive of nation building, but having the platforms when the intelligence, whenever it can be confirmed 100% of the time, or 2 of the likelihood of probability of being accurate, we annihilate the threat there rather than have that threat materialize on American soil. So having those influences there, and then when our men and women are injured, a lot of the military operations in Europe, in Germany, are our military hospitals, our military rapid response areas. So that's a bigger question. We have our NATO alliances, we have our NATO obligations that we're adhering to and protecting. This whole pivot to the Pacific is something that obviously has a lot of areas further complicated.
Congressman, there's another elephant in the room, and that's the anniversary of 9/11. Do you think all of this is building up toward that, and should we be more wary of what's
We
going
should
to
be
be
concerned.
happening next week? Is it,
Yeah. No,
That's
9/11
it.
is obviously a very symbolic date, and we saw what happened a year ago on 9/11. And it's something that we need to amp up and be prepared for, and learn the lessons of the past.
The last one, we are going to wrap.
Why do we still give foreign aid to all these countries that don't support us? And I mean, billions of dollars every year.
It's a great question. We spend about $47 billion in foreign aid. We've been a supporter of reducing that foreign aid as we deal with all the other issues that we're faced with in our economic situation in America. And I'm glad to report that number's going down, which is good. Now, there are foreign aid investment dollars. For example, I'm a strong advocate for the state of Israel. And the $3 billion approximately that we give to the state of Israel to ensure that relationship is strong and that Israel has the resources that it needs to persevere in that area of the world. There are a slew of reasons why that aid to Israel, for example, has returned on the investment. You got the Suez Canal. You talk about commerce that's flowing through there and influence on there, trying to keep the region stable. I mean, those dollars potentially lead to that stability that historically has been demonstrated in that area. So there are good returns on some of that foreign aid. That's the question we've been asking, is what is the return on that foreign aid dollar? What do we get in our American interest as a result of that foreign aid? And is the foreign aid being held accountable? Is it going to the right people? I had a great conversation one time with some folks from Pakistan. And one of the things they said is what you really should focus on, Congressman, making sure the aid gets to the villages. And for example, one of the things they recommended, build a water plant and put a big sign on it. Brought to you by the generosity of the American people, as opposed to it staying in the top levels in someone's pocket and going there. You would get a bigger bang for your buck, as it was told to me, as a result of that. And you would be changing generational, reputational positions that need to be changed. So you'll never get to zero on foreign aid, but obviously it's time to focus on America.
We have to clear out of the courtroom here. So,
I appreciate it. I really
Before we
appreciate
go,
it.
we did think we've done the other 5 is folks that form an opinion. You feel that we should authorize use of force in Syria, you could raise your hand if you have an opinion. If you feel that we should not authorize use of force in Syria, please raise your hand.
Anybody recognize State Assemblyman Andy Goodell is here? I saw him walk in. Did he walk out? All right, I appreciate it. Yeah.